Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dial In, the podcast about customer service, automation, AI, contact centers, and everything in between. I'm your host, Gadi Shamia, the CEO and co-founder of Replicant, the company that automate customer service calls using AI. And I'm really excited about the guest we have today. It's someone I know for 8-9 years now, taught me a lot of what I know about customer service. My guest today is Mike Milburn, currently the co-CEO of Pimly, but formerly and for 15 years, someone that built from the ground up Salesforce Service Cloud business, from being a consultant almost 20 years ago back in Chicago to all the way to be the general manager of Service Cloud and later a chief customer officer. He knows everything about customer service. He worked with the largest contact centers in the world. Welcome, Mike.
It's good to be here, and it's fun to remember those days walking around San Francisco as we were both building companies and sharing stories. So it's my pleasure to be here, and you're looking great.
Thank you. I tried. Put my best shirt for you, Mike. So I'm really curious. I think specifically for you, you had such an amazing journey, and you went through all the steps in customer service, starting as a consultant. So maybe even start earlier in this. How did Salesforce decided that it need to be in a service business?
So if you go back in the Wayback Machine to that early 2000s, and of course the name Salesforce is kind of synonymous with Salesforce and Salesforce automation. Salesforce actually had the foundations or the kind of the chemistry set for service built in from the beginning. And it had the case object, and it had, I think, a knowledge base at the time called Answers, if I get that right. And so it always had those in its beginning. Sales, service, and marketing, or sales and service, at least, were always a part of that. But what happened, from my recollection, was Salesforce started selling Salesforce automation, and then all of a sudden, customers said, "Well, service is as important." This was all the way back 20 some years ago, and so very quickly, all the folks that they hired to go build and design and implement and know everything about sales, all of a sudden were thought about service. And it was almost sort of like, who knows that? Who knows that dark art about service? And I remember my interview process, and they were like, do you know customer service people? And do you understand telephony? And do you know all these terms? And it was fascinating. So I think if I go back, Salesforce got pulled into the world of customer service because their customers pulled them into almost immediate. If the company started in 99, you're talking about 3 or 4 years later, they got pulled directly into it.
And you started as on the ground as implementing the first Service Cloud customers. Do you remember your first implementation?
I do. And so I went to Gwinner, North Dakota, to a company that I'm sure you know called Bobcat. They make those incredible little skid loaders. And Salesforce at the time had a program called Quick Start. And believe it or not, you would fly out on Monday, meet with the team on Monday afternoon, design it on Tuesday, build on Wednesday, train on Thursday, and go on Friday. And so the first one I had to do was in Gwinner, North Dakota, and flew into Fargo and drove out. And we built a call center in 5 days. And so I remember that year I did 52 of those. So I worked 52 weeks that year, and I built 52 call centers. And I tell you what, when you can use a tool, any tool, whether it's a shovel or a hammer or software or technology, when you build a lot of something, you get really good at understanding what works and what doesn't work.
That's insane, and it's something I didn't know. What happened to this 5 days that now they are 5 months, 5 years sometimes? Like, what happened in the process? I'm curious.
I think a couple of things happened, but it actually helped me kind of formulate one of my talk tracks, which was usually, or the legacy call center migration, you'd start in one calendar year and you'd finish in another. If you started in summer of 2023, you'd finish in summer of 2024. And you could, coming from Chicago, it was like, is there snow on the ground? Well, the time there's snow on the ground again is when you're going to be done. So I was fascinated by this quick starts, and maybe here's a good point too, to say what brought me to Salesforce. So, I think the things that pull people into customer service is a really fascinating, how we got here. And I had, out of college, I'd taken a job with Barilla America, the Italian pasta manufacturer. And one of my jobs was to figure out how to program and work in Ericsson PBX. So I went to Ericsson school and figured out how to program it, and got all the manuals, and figured out how to run the telephony side to this pasta plant. And a couple of years later, a company in Chicago called Apropos, which was the first multi-channel interaction management company. So the first time chat and case and knowledge base and all these channels got combined into one system. Apropos called and they said, you know Ericsson? And at the time, call centers were like North America centric or European centric. And so you had Nortel and Avaya, Mitel, and some of these like US brands. And they were expanding to Europe. And they're like, how do you know Ericsson? So I went to Apropos and literally spent 6 years doing nothing but building call centers all around the world, working every Saturday night, which is another legacy to call centers. You'd have to cut over on Saturday with all your voice systems. So after 6 years of building, designing, and implementing those call centers, Salesforce called, and CRM, we were integrating the Salesforce left and right. I didn't really know anybody at Salesforce, but I got a phone call in 2004 and 5. And so took that phone call and that's what led to joining Salesforce. So got pulled into customer service and then just found Salesforce at the right place at the right time.
So still on the Wayback Machine, what did the contact center look like in 2005, 6 when you work on those? And how is it different today? And in aggregate, how they look in 05, how they look today?
Yeah, this is. I wish I had my iPhone back then to kind of record this. So let's just talk about a few vectors. First of all, let's go from the tech kind of landscape up. So in 03, 04, and 05, you would show up and you'd go into the server room of a call center, which is like, that's kind of a foreign thing right now. Like where's the server room? And you would install your telephony cards into a server and you would bind those telephony cards to the PBX with all this arcane hardware. And so just the fact you were in a server room doing that, you had to talk to a database and you had to talk to all the different components of service were all individual and you had to kind of link those together. Then, and from the agent perspective, they had a telephony console or like Cisco Agent Desktop is what was stuck in my head, or CAD. You had a desktop and then you had all your other tools and they were all separate. So you had call control and then you had whatever other tools, and there was no browser-based tools. So they were almost all like 32-bit applications on your desktop, and you would load them and they were take a long time to load and they would crash and you'd run out of memory. And so the agents were running on PCs. There was almost no thin terminals at that time. There wasn't really that concept. And there was just a ton of applications and it was really, really slow. So the tech side was over there. And then I think the business of service, well, I know the business of service was much different. And it was, you could, the way I would describe it is service didn't have the title or hierarchy that it does now. Service is now on par with sales. It's on, the chief service officer at companies, whatever title they have or she has, that is on par with head of sales, HR, legal, everybody that sits around the C-level. Service is at that table. Back then, service reported into the CIO or service reported into the line of business. And you could just tell that it was a secondary thought or a third thought or a fourth thought. And so you could see it in the call center operations. A lot of them were in, I affectionately like to say, burned out shopping malls. And you'd see like a shopping mall in Kansas City or North Dakota or in Florida, and they would have a bunch of people kind of crammed into this. The really nice call centers were in areas, but they're always outside of like big major metros. They were always you knew you were in a call center. It definitely didn't have the look and the feel and the responsibility and accountability that modern service has.
And what do you think drove this change? What brought service to the forefront the way it is today?
So I think that the word SaaS has software as a service. I mean, it's got service right in the title of it. And I think there's a double entendre there. It's, what does that service mean? It means delivering the service, but it also means providing service. And so it's the customer that did it. It's the realization that every brand is only as good as the service that they provide. And so whether you're a footwear maker, an apparel maker, a food manufacturer, a restaurant, we just keep getting reminded that customer service matters and the return customers matter more than ever. And that, I think the visibility of that, the business models around subscription revenue and SaaS has driven that. And I also think that there's just an increased transparency.
So riddle me that. So if you do the today and the versus the past you're describing, C-suite is now have customer service in it. We have modern SaaS tools that can be used for almost everything. The agents don't have to work with these old terminals. There's a tons of self-service. If you think of things you couldn't have done as a consumer 15, 20 years ago, like change a seat in an airline or even buy online, all of it did not exist. So you need to call so many more times for so many more transactions. And yet we're now, again, 20 years later, with all this technology and customers still wait half an hour or an hour to speak with an agent. They still speak with an agent that usually, in many cases, don't know how to solve their issue. They still being transferred without context between agents. How do you explain that? All the investment in this space, and it feels as if with many companies, we're still in the same place.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that. I don't know if there's like an explanation, like go here, left or right. I guess the way that I think about it is, if you think about how far customer service has come, it is every great brand and company has a service strategy. That's new. And that is there. I think you're starting to see CEO level candidates that come from a service background. They're going to change that. And then some of what you mentioned, like the hold time or the poor customer set, some of those industries are really, really hard to change. And that's not an excuse. I'm not like there's always a desire and appetite for change, but some of those industries that have those symptoms, they're just really hard old industries. I guess, Zappos taught us this, 15 years ago. And I know Zappos has certainly fallen on some different times, but they taught us the effective service and how to build that business. I was just reading a LinkedIn post about a restaurant chain that grew so fast that they had poor service and they went up and closed super fast. So I think service is now part of the modern DNA of companies, and sort of the modern way to build a business is you have to have service ingrained from scratch. I think that there's a legacy component to that I think deserves to be challenged and deserves to be criticized and deserves to move. But I also think that those companies have really hard scale and they got really hard customer base, and there's really hard intrinsic challenges, and they're big for a reason. And so I think there's like a middle ground to walk on. It is, are they making improvements? Are they showing commitments towards service, or are they ignoring it? And so I think that's the approach as somebody that cares deeply about services in the industries that have those symptoms. Are they doing a lot of things to help? And so I'm a United Airlines customer, and United Airlines have been there for 20 years. And I've seen them add, like you said, change a seat, flight notifications. To me, there's probably ways they could do better, but they've also shown me dramatic improvements in their service experience over time.
Yeah, actually, United is one of the airlines I recognize, because if you're a frequent traveler, they don't even let you speak with anyone who is not experienced, 10 years customer service agent, because there's nothing more frustrating to, as somebody flew millions of miles around the world, to speak with someone who's probably 22 and maybe flew twice in their life. And they have to explain basic concept about flight. And United does pretty well with making sure they're frequent travelers that know the space, speak with agent and know what they're doing. So you walked in all these contact centers over the years. You probably can smell a good one from a bad one. What makes a great customer service contact center? What makes a poor one? What are the characteristics of the best ones, and what are some of the characteristics of the worst ones?
Yeah. So let's see. So some of the things that I remember, just like as kind of like the archetype, is when you get, inevitably there's a call center tour. And the tour tells you a lot about it. Like, are you proud of it? Do you want to showcase it? Do you want to, do you want to give an external, do you want your customers and your partners to go there? And so there's almost this like split between the people that do the tours and then the people that are like, we got to get approval, or we've got to make sure that the agents are ready for it. You can just kind of sense it. Like the ones that are ready for tours, like it's an asset. Maybe that's a good way to say it. It's an asset that they want to showcase. So I think you can feel that right off the bat. Then the agents kind of typically fall into, I think, two categories, at least I call them mavens and mavericks. You've got the folks that are really gung-ho, they want to change, they want to move, they want to help. And then you've got the folks that are cautious about change, they're cautious about transformation. And I've got an opinion on that I'll share in a little bit. But you've got the ones that want to go fast, and you get the ones that are a little bit more cautious. And I always loved going on tours and hearing both sides. It was a little bit like, modern politics. If you go too far to whatever side, up, down, right, or left, you get one view, and you get to the other side, you get another view, and you kind of want to hear both. And so I always loved hearing I wish we could do this. And then I always loved hearing, gosh, there's really some fundamental problems that we got to fix. And so we're scared of that, or here's where we failed in the past. So that side of it, I thought was great. I also loved seeing roadmap and change. So whenever I visit, my archetype for a service operation was kind of like my house. Every year you try and make one sort of remodel, whether it's big or small, but you trying and make change to your home. And so I always loved going into a service operation and saying, ignore our knowledge base. We're in the process of revamping it, or, give us a little freedom here while we do our post call survey or wrap up, because we're revamping that. So I think the change piece of it was something that I really thought I looked for. And if I didn't see that, that was also kind of a symptom of that. From kind of a visibility and metrics standpoint, really easy to understand where they are from a KPI standpoint, whether it's traditional CSAT or NPS or handle time or any of those. Really kind of clear, easy, digestible metrics. To me, what that symbolized was leadership. When you have a leader or the owner or the decision maker behind your service operation, it's driving those metrics down. Everybody kind of knows what they are and is super proud of them. And then the other thing that I look for a lot was the organization around the agent or the system experience. Architecture matters. And when you see folks in their systems, and there was windows and screens and everything happening everywhere, usually that was a symptom of complexity and a lack of simplification.
And what are some, you were in the business of deploying new technology to contact centers, and I'm sure behind the scenes, you coach many customers on what's the best way to get budget approved, get agreement around some massive changes that they've done to their customer service strategy. What's your advice to people that sit here today and want to modernize a contact center? They have a desire, but don't necessarily the organization support to move through this conservatism and maybe the old approaches to customer service.
To kind of paint that tapestry for a second, when we were building Service Cloud, what we were building against was on-prem, and there was sort of this technology buying cycle. And the buying cycle was you'd buy it, you'd implement it, and then maybe you'd upgrade it. Maybe you'd upgrade it once or twice, but it was like 10 years old. We were evangelizing cloud and trusting your data in the cloud and trusting your security in the cloud and your speed and your telephony and your chats and your customer interactions, and insourced and outsourced. And so there was a couple of different dynamics going on. There was, do you trust the cloud? And that was a lot different than it is today. I don't think you debate whether cloud is the right infrastructure today than you debated 20 years ago. So, okay, we made it through that. Then inevitably came up this conversation that you were asking that ends with big bang versus pilot versus test. And how do you safely get this through a corporate budgeting process? And so service is one of these disciplines where kind of like, ERP, it's all or nothing in some ways, but you got to prove it. So you can't just go all in. And if it doesn't work, you're left with no service operation. So I worked on a couple really successful flagship ones that I think were models. One of the ones was Dell. And I remember that we went in and we did a pilot, and it was like a month pilot, and we kind of expanded to like a 3-month pilot. And it was, can we prove a core set of features and functions? And so that pilot, whether it's a conference room pilot or an actual pilot, that allowed confidence to actually prove that the system would do what it said it was going to do, and prove that remove some of the risk, but also buy in the business. And I think that's a really important part of this. Is it's one thing to technically prove it. It's another thing to get the business on board. And when you show the business that it's going to be safe and secure, but you can bring innovation and you can move at the same side of business, then it tends to speed along that process. Not hidden, but I think the other thing that we very deliberately did was make sure the partner ecosystem was up to speed. And so in a lot of service operations, there are tremendous integrators, whether it's a regional systems integrator or a global systems integrator. Service is hard. And a lot of companies depend on an integration company, on a systems integrator to help them. And, it's funny, as we start Pimly, we're giving all of our partners the same product training and enablement that we gave the Service Cloud it's almost 15 years ago now, just because we partners are the way that service is successful. Mm-hmm. So I think, to kind of summarize it, I think you've got to start and you've got to do pilots and build that trust. I think you got to bring the business on board and show them how they can go forward. And I think the integrators are a huge piece of getting comfortable here.
So what is the one thing or few things that will really surprise someone who never been in a contact center but called them frequently, that you kind of seen in this largest contact centers in the world? What will be surprising to someone just walk there for the first time?
Well, I think it starts with, pick whatever number of agents that are there, and then just stop for a second and say, all day, these folks are talking to customers or emailing or chatting or whatever. And you just say it out loud and you go, wait a minute, like you and I think have developed, and we have so many conversations about how much we love talking to customers and how much we love enjoying that and hearing from them. Just think about your company, whatever company you're at, and think of, wait a minute, all day, every day, there's folks and all they do is engage your customers. I don't think people quite realize how that is such a responsibility. And so then when you kind of grasp that and you go, you are tasked with that frontline responsibility of that relationship, whether it's a phone call or an email or a long-term relationship, you're tasked with that. And so I think the word, customer service agent has changed a lot. Like I know, when 20 years ago, you have this image of somebody in the call center or contact center world that was kind of transactional and sort of just like answer. And now I think that word customer service is like, it's part of what we all do. Like, even though you're the CEO and founder of a company and I'm CEO and founder of a company, like I do a lot of service, even at my level. I love taking phone calls about a question, a comment, or a problem. So I think the word customer service or agent is now, it's a powerful job. It's a powerful term. So I think that's one side of it. I think the next side of it is how hard the job is. When, when you think about what a typical agent has to work through or deal with, they have to interact with the customer and they attempt to understand the customer's problem and they attempt to know what they are before they call or before the interaction. But they literally have to, they're like a triage. They're like they're like a doctor. They've got to figure out what's wrong and help that customer in a very short period of time. That's a hard, stressful job. And then I think the final piece to it is kind of the scale. You look at most service operations and they're very military in the way that, whether it's the number of hours they work or how hard they work. but the service discipline is a very taxing and demanding discipline.
These are such amazing observations. I think that people don't realize how daunting and repetitive the work of an agent is. You may call them once, and then you don't call anyone for another month, and they just spoke with 40 before you, and they speak with 40 after you, and they all ask the same questions. And this gave me actually this work the last 8-9 years in the customer service space create tons of empathy. I will never scream at an agent anymore, knowing how stressful their work is and how much not empowered they are. And one of the reasons that I started Replicon was exactly that, just knowing that there is value in having conversation are different and engaging and not time boxed. And these are the complex, interesting problems, but there's very little value changing your seat on an airplane or making your food reservation or taking an order from you, which is literally just typing into a computer what you say. Just imagine that on the other side, there's someone that just sits there and types stuff into a computer based on what you say, which is something machines do significantly better. And part of what we're excited about is just change this idea that agents are just sitting there and clicking all day long. So I'm so happy you went to the agent part, because people tend to forget them, and they are the unsung heroes of this entire space.
Since we're there, sorry, I was when I was thinking about how excited I was to be here, and I was thinking about what are some other examples, because we sort of, even now in this conversation, we're in agent mode. And, the nearest thought came to my mind, which was, I have a 2-year-old, and we end up at the same restaurant because of the waitress. The waitress sees our problems, our challenges, our toys, our crying, our milk, whatever. She sees that, and she helps us through that situation. And so we go there every week, and we do our best to tip, and we do our best to give gratitude. But isn't that waitress kind of like an agent?
Yeah.
Like they're doing service. And so you kind of look around your life and you go, in the service world that we've created around us in modern 2023, a lot of the service industry really mirrors agents. Sometimes we're just over the phone or over text or over an interaction. But if I look at my phone, look at my text messages, they're full of people asking me for things. Mike, I need this, fix this. People I haven't talked to for a long time. And so the servant culture, the service culture that we've created or live in is really, I think, is mirroring the service world, the customer service world. Agents were just doing it for the last 50 years. But you and I live in this world today as people. And so I just think there's something about the humanity and where we are as a society. We're living in a service world. And so the empathy that we give to agents, we really give that empathy to waitresses and hospital staff and school teachers and policemen and all the services that we deal with, like Uber drivers. Like, why would I ever get mad at an Uber driver? Like, they're just here to help me.
Yeah, it's a great point. Funny story is, when I was in my mid-20s, I ran a small customer service team for a software company. I had about 25 people on my team. Probably 75% of my team are people I recruited in restaurants because they were just great servers, and I really enjoyed their service. And maybe 15 years later, I was sitting with Shopify. That was a customer of Talkdesk at the time. We got really great service in a restaurant. I was sitting with their entire customer service team. And I thought, you should hire this person. She was amazing. She was attentive. She was funny. She was witty. She dealt with, you guys with your weird energy. And I ended up hiring her for customer service. It was closing the loop on the best technique to hiring agents. There's a lot of different technologies kind of shifting gears. It's such a great conversation. When you look at today, what's available to customer service leaders, what's the first item that should be on someone's list now that can really transform customer service from a technology perspective?
I think that there's kind of a caveat here, which is I'm going to assume that they're on a cloud platform of some kind and that they're not a legacy platform. I'm going to assume that there is the remodeling approach that I've talked about, which is kind of two-speed architecture. You get the longer term vision, and then you have the shorter. How do you go fast on a couple of things, which I'm a big fan of. So let's just stipulate those. So I don't think you can get around the AI conversation today. And how do you think about AI in service? What are you going to experiment with? What are you going to do? What are you going to trust? And where is your entry into the AI conversation on service? I think that is absolutely number one. I also think that number two is, I believe that automation and messaging are kind of going hand in hand. And so the relationship between what you digitize, whether it's on SMS or as we're learning, SMS is almost exclusively a Western technology, and then over the top messaging in other parts of the world, your relationship with service on these new modes and new channels, I think is really important. And the automation that comes with that.
Yeah, and it's talking about AI, bring me a bit to Replicant. So we've been automating customer service calls using AI, and one of the observations I had in this journey is that we built for 20 years, or the industry built for 20 years, a stack that all revolved around an agent. And it's all revolved around the efficiency of the model, which is the staffing challenges, the training challenges, the cost challenges. And there is possibly a new world in which the stack is built around the customer, and AI is part of it, agents are part of it, but it's no longer an agent-centric stack, it's a customer-centric stack. Again, someone had been in this industry way longer than I've been. What do you think about this?
So, I mean, I think just talking about our journey together and how we ended up on reconnecting on this phone call is illustrative of how I think about it. So, for everybody listening to the podcast or watching this, we worked together. I think it was over 10 years ago. I think you said 7 or 8, but I think you're minimizing our age now, but maybe it was a little bit longer than that. But anyway, so, we left to go do other things. And one of the things I did, I was so fortunate. I joined the board of a company called OnProcess and got to know what OnProcess was doing. And I think they're in an amazing supply chain space. And when I got to know the team, and I was kind of curious, is like what they were doing for service and how they were thinking about it, because that was my background. The first logo I saw was Replicant. And when I was like, what is that? And I looked at it and I was like, there's my friend Gotti. Look at what he's doing. And I dug into it and I was like, this makes total sense, because they're building their stack from not the agent side, but from the result side, from the customer side. What is the customer doing? And then what technology and processes do I need to build directly from that? So that's a real life example of, as people move jobs and they change around, I witnessed that directly from my seat. And it's super powerful because it's not building, like we used to measure the amount of spend on an agent. And so think about that for a second. It used to go into service operation and say, so how many agents you have? You spend 7,000 on an agent software. Well, who gets to spend? And then how much you spend on hardware. And so that was sort of the bottoms up approach to figure out the budget and sort of what tech you were going to do. That was years ago. And what you guys have done is reverse that and say, figure out the problem, figure out the customer and what their problem is. And then let's spend money and technology and solution figuring that out.
Yeah, OnProcess is such a great example because it goes back to this point you made about agents. What part of what they do is they help companies retrieve equipment that was leased as part of a contract. And most people are good. They put it in a box, the same box at the end of the contract. Some people forget. Some people move around and need reminders. But imagine the work of the agent. They had to outbound call customer after customer and say, did you return it? If you did, what's the tracking number? Or if you didn't, would you return it? And just deal with this call time and time and time again, hundreds of times a day. It's really daunting. And taking this process and automating it not only help the agents, because now they can do more interesting work, it's also help retrieving more equipment and help reducing the cost. So it's this really interesting win-win-win, and it's the beginning of what I believe will be the new agent. An agent is much more sophisticated, paid much better, because you cannot rely on them to do to read scripts anymore. You don't need them for scripts. Machines can do that. So I'm really excited about that. And maybe in this spirit, I'm like everybody to track what's going with AI, LM, ChatGPT. What do you think the future of contact centers and AI look like now with large language models?
Yeah. So I think there's a little like here's how I approach that, and I think it's really interesting. So the way I kind of define service was it generally started around 1950 when the word call centers were started because telephony was hard. And so I think in kind of era one of service, there were call centers, and it was like 1950 to 1980, call it. And about 1980 going into 1990 was kind of Gen 2 or version 2 of service, and omni-channel started. And you started to bring in email and faxes and chat and knowledge base and some of these technologies to help service. Okay. And I was a young man when I started that journey in 1999. That lasted for, let's say, 10 or 12 years. So that was kind of era 2. And then you kind of had era 3, which was maybe 2000 through 2020, maybe getting the years off by a few years, but that was the kind of the rise of the CRMs. And you saw what Salesforce did, and you saw what ServiceNow did, and you saw what Zendesk did, and so what you saw TalkDesk did, and so many of these companies created service tools and automation around the call center. And so you kind of have these eras, and AI actually started very early in that kind of version 2, version 3, era 2, era 3, when I believe it was Nuance started helping IVRs process text to speech and process that. And it took, I remember I did my first Nuance training in like 99 or 2000, and it was really complex in the grammars and understanding how to hard code all those things together. But they were trying to learn what the language models were so they could turn the language into data. So you forget the AI isn't new for service. It started a long time ago. And then you started to do things like skills-based routing. And skills-based routing was a way of saying, Gotti, what's your specialty? What's my specialty? Let's match that up to something. And it's not quite AI, but it was pattern matching, and it was driven to the customer outcome. So you had some of that going on. Then you had knowledge bases. I mean, Salesforce purchased Intranet because they were able to surface up the right piece of information to the right agent at the right time. So I think you have this history in service of some really unique things. The first thing is it has an incredible amount of data, and large language models, and I'm not an expert at the technical side, but large language models need a lot of data. And service is one of those areas that has that, whether it's voice calls or emails or transactions. It is one of the disciplines in business that actually has a significant amount of data to do the model training and the model enrichment. So I think that you got to say that out loud. The second piece to it is there's a lot of cost in service that has become operationally manageable. Most of the people that run service operations globally have a really fine understanding of where the costs are. And so that is very unique in service. In some of the other disciplines of business, manufacturing has it, ERP has it, but sales, go online and look at sales efficiency arguments across software or across their own companies. Are you efficient across seed round, A round, B round? There's a lot of conversation about that. So you've got a large amount of data, and then you have operational leaders that are figuring that want to get into it. So I think that I think the large language models are going to dramatically impact the service operation. I think we're still, I'm still seeing what's going on, but I think they have the tenets that they're going to dramatically change it.
So one last question before we move into our speed dial part. How did your journey led you to start Bimly?
Yeah, so customer service has been incredibly good to me. And I think you'd both agree that we're both blessed that we're able to build a career in service. And so for 15 years, for 20 years, I was part of the service world total, pre-Salesforce and Salesforce. And then after Salesforce, I went and joined a company that was in the PIM space, or product information management space. And the servant side of me said, well, what about customer service and product information? And so when I was like, most of the service questions are about products or services. And so I was like, how did I find myself, again, thinking about service in this? And again, a piece of service is I got linked up with one of my old friends who actually started at Siebel, and Mike Danefelt, and we decided that it was the right place and the right time to start a company. So the service DNA actually started 20 years ago with us. It carried through a friendship that lasted 20 years. And now we co-founded and started a company called Pimly to modernize product information. And the customer service applications, I'm sure we're going to be working together in our spaces. The customer service applications are what we're most excited about.
That's cool. I've seen it even in the description of Pimly on LinkedIn. There was customer service. So let's give you as much customer information as possible so you can improve customer service. So the DNA is still there. Absolutely. So we'll transition to speed dial. So this is where I'm going to ask you a quick question or a series of questions. You're going to answer in a quick one sentence. Let's go. So what's your morning drink?
My morning drink is coffee and water together.
How specific are you about coffee? Is it like whatever? Which coffee is that?
Yeah, I see like this at night this time. It's whatever is in the coffee machine, non-specific.
Non-specific. Which company you love when it comes to customer service? Which company really does it well?
So we just talked about United. I think that is fascinating. I'm having a great experience with Nike right now across the brands. And then what's a good third one? It's a good question. Let me think of that in the back of my head. But right now, I would say United Airlines is really dazzling me.
That's awesome. 1K here. If you think of the customer service of the future, which traits they need to be successful?
I think mobile. I'm finding myself trying to do exclusively operate from my phone. I think proactive, that's mandatory. I think personalized is mandatory. And I also think that there's a surprise element to that. I mean, we were just talking about United, but when I crossed over 2 million miles, I think they let me know that I did that. And the fact that they understood my commitment to their commitment will just increase my loyalty. So I think that comes with personalization, but it's also a surprise element to that. The expectations that I have of service is that high.
What's a high point or just really memorable point in your career?
So obviously, the Salesforce experience was something that was just tremendous. The fact that I think we ushered in the golden age of service at Salesforce. And when I talked about those eras, Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, when we met, I think we were creating the golden age of service. And I think being part of the creation of that golden age of service is something that I'm just really, really proud of.
Yeah, what do you all need to be proud of? You joined a company called Salesforce, which now has a service business, which is probably 20-30% larger than its sales business. Maybe it should be renamed to Serviceforce because that's what Salesforce does nowadays. If you're not running Pimly, what would you do?
Got a 2-year-old at home, and I would be even spend more time being a dad. And if I wasn't doing that, I'd be on the pickleball courts, figuring out how to play professional pickleball.
Oh, seriously? Okay, so you're this is pickleball, and then one step further to retirement. Good on you. Good on you. You have a baby, and you're gonna play pickleball.
Just before this whole career in software, I was a tennis pro, so I'm returning back to my roots with a racket and a ball.
Got it. Tennis for kids. I used to play squash, but cannot really do it anymore. It's too hard on your bones. AI destroy the world or will create amazing things? What do you think? All right. And last question is, from all the people we met in your long career in customer service, who should be on this podcast? That will be really interesting, engaging, and insightful.
So I'm going to nominate somebody that I think is just an incredible service leader. And I've had the pleasure of being across the table and on the same side of the table. And that is Jim Roth from Salesforce.
Thank you for the recommendation. An email for him is just coming right out. Mike, thank you so much for joining. It was so insightful. I had like 50 other questions, but we ran out of time. But it was a real pleasure. Thank you for coming. Thank everybody for dialing in. Until next time.
Let's do it in Austin next time. And I look forward to hosting you, my friend.
All right. See you in Austin.